Are live on Facebook. That camera or which camera? This one there?
Yeah.
How many cameras do we have today?
We have 3.
Ooh.
Now we have a new one that's just for you. Actually, I'm going to try it right now.
Should have combed your hair, Mark.
I should have. Yes, I should have got the makeup done properly.
I should get some hair because all they see is my bald spot there.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have with us today Lynn Desjardins.
Hello, everyone.
Lavon Savunt.
Hello.
And Marie-Claude Simard on keyboards.
Hi, everybody.
And in the control room, we have Chantal Saint-Sauveur in the darkness, hiding. But we know you're there because we're being controlled. She is our very own big brother, but in this case, big sister. Anyway, coming up on the show today, Lavon, let's start with you. Serious subject.
Yeah, first downpours have already hit the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh, and I'll speak with a UN official about what the international community is doing to prepare these camps for the upcoming monsoon season.
All right, Lynn?
I'll talk to a former pilot who explains that the fatal Southwest airplane accident involved 3 emergencies at the same time.
And I'll tell you about how Facebook has shaken up the Canadian legal system and presumably other legal systems around the world. Marie-Claude Simard, what do you have for us later on?
Well, I'll be talking to you about news stories that caught my attention because they're all related to laws that we all like to break every once in a while.
The broken law syndrome. Those are some of the stories coming up, along with some of your comments to various stories on our websites here on The Link Online. All right, if you're on Facebook, then you probably have seen how it suggests friending people who happen occasionally to be in your vicinity, and that is, people you may come across fairly regularly in your activities. Well, that friending function seems to have revealed a bit of a worrisome side to it. In criminal court cases with a jury, no one is supposed to know the identity of the jurors, and that, of course, is to avoid being able to bribe them or to intimidate them. But because of cell phones and the fact that jurists and court staff and others are in the same location for often several days or even longer, Facebook will start suggesting that people become friends. And simply comparing the friend's face with those on the jury, that can reveal who the jurists are. And from that and other postings on Facebook and elsewhere, you can begin to reveal some personal information about the jurists, which could be useful to lawyers pleading the case. Also, it could be of interest to people who are, shall we say, less ethical, who are hanging around the courtroom. Now, I spoke to Alan, a Montreal lawyer and expert in privacy and international law, and I asked him if he was surprised by this news about how jurists' identities could be discovered.
Well, I'm not particularly surprised. Now, this is a little bit disturbing because it's perverting one of the more important central tenets of our judicial system. But in terms of how the technology works and how ubiquitous technology is in this day and age, I'm not particularly surprised, to be honest.
Well, let's get into how it works. How can someone who is whose name is basically secret be identified through this technology?
So, the whole principle of Facebook is designed to connect you with as many friends as possible, friends being a grand term for anyone who you may know or want to know, for that matter. So Facebook has a function whereby if you're in the same location as someone for several days in a row, it will suggest that this person become your friend. Now, this is designed to have you become friends with, say, people you go to school with or people you work with every day. So using the geolocation functions of your mobile phone, Facebook is able to determine that 2 people who have Facebook on their phones are near each other for several days in a row, and then will suggest they become friends. So in this case, the jurors and someone working for the defense were in the courthouse together for several days in a row. And as a result, Facebook suggested that they become friends. And when the defense person working for the defense would see the pictures of people that had been suggested, well, they could see that it was the same person who was sitting in the courtroom that day, and then they could find information about them.
So how could a defense lawyer use that to his advantage to know that jurist number 5 is actually Joe Blow, who lives in such and such a street, such and such a city kind of thing?
Well, Well, there are two ways, one much more nefarious than the other. In the worst case scenario, and one of the reasons we have anonymous jurors is that a juror can't be intimidated or bribed or some other way to influence the outcome of a trial in a way that is considerably nasty and probably against the law. The less nefarious way is that if you have personal information about a juror, you might tailor your defense to, in the trial to a certain way. So, for example, if you know that if you found out through Facebook that somebody has kids, you may play up the fact that your defendant has kids, and the juror, as a result, may feel some sympathy for the defendant. So there's other ways that you could sort of tailor your pleadings and your presentation to the jury based on what you may know about a juror. As a lawyer, I presume that all lawyers will act ethically, but perhaps someone who is a criminal or less ethical might use it to, as I mentioned earlier, that more nefarious way to intimidate a juror.
And that was an excerpt of my conversation with Montreal lawyer Alan Mendelson, who says that legal systems and jurists around the world should take note. And for now, he says the best security bet for serving on juries is simply to leave their mobile phones at home. Coming up, more on an accident. Well, this was a story that made a lot of news and got a lot of people, I guess, a little bit concerned. It involved a person who died, and the whole thing could have been much worse, and that was when an engine blew out on a Southwest Airlines jet on Tuesday, and a piece of the metal from that basically the engine kind of exploded in a way. A piece of the metal ended up flying into the plane and breaking a window. And that, of course, when you're flying at about 10,000 meters or something, causes instant depressurization. You've seen this on films. The plane depressurizes and things get sucked out. And that, in fact, is sort of what happened to this passenger. She was able to get pulled back into the plane, but they weren't able to resuscitate her. And that, of course, raised a lot of questions. And you looked at some of these, Lynn.
I did, Mark. The obvious question was, why did this happen? It seems that one of the fan blades on the engine's compressor came loose, probably due to metal fatigue. There, of course, will be an intensive investigation. It's ongoing into this, and an inspection of this type of engine, which is used by other planes, other companies. I spoke with Keith Mackey. He's a former captain and president of his own aviation consulting firm. He said this is a very reliable engine, that it's logged millions of hours with little or no problem. And he suspects the failure of this one was likely a one-off, and that people should not be afraid of flying on the many 737 jets which are powered by them. I asked him about Jennifer Riordan, that is the woman whose upper body was sucked out of the cabin, and I asked him why more people were not affected.
Remember now, when this window ruptured, the shrapnel pierced the window, and that caused the window to fail. So the window blew out, kind of like pricking a hole in a balloon. So all the air that was pressurizing the cabin was trying to escape through that window. And when the woman's body went through the window, she blocked some of that air, if you will, slowed down the decompression process. So, the passengers that pulled her back in did an amazing job, but probably having passed through that window, there was no way to possibly save her life.
How do you feel about the plane's captain's handling of the situation?
Well, we're referring to the captain, and we're impressed because it was a woman and a Navy fighter pilot, which is very impressive. But remember, the airplane is operated not by one person solo. This is a crew, and the crew had to work together to get the job done. You have two pilots and probably 4 flight attendants on that airplane, and they all had to coordinate their activities, understand what was going on. And this wasn't just a single emergency. It was really 3 emergencies that were occurring almost simultaneously. And they had to deal with them. and there were a lot of things they probably did not know. For example, the first problem was the engine explosion. Well, that was certainly startling enough. There's doubts in your mind whether there is an engine fire that goes along with it or not. If the explosion's bad enough, it may disable the fire detection equipment. So you really don't know. You know you've lost power on the engine. You know that it's exploded. Followed immediately by a cabin decompression. So now you know that there's a structural problem with the airplane. Normally, if we were to lose pressurization at jet altitudes, we descend at a high rate of speed, if you will, to get down as quickly as possible. But with a structural failure, the crew probably did not want to go at the proper speed and had to slow the airplane down to minimally stress whatever area turned out to be damaged. So they had to do 3 of these things all at the same time. And, of course, they had to coordinate what they were doing with air traffic control to make sure as they dove down, if you will, they were going through levels where other airplanes might have been flying. The traffic had to have been separated. Then they had to find a suitable airport with hopefully good weather and coordinate this with the ground so that the people on the ground knew what was taking place and how to prepare for their arrival, all the while coordinating with the flight attendants to see what was going on in the cabin. So I think the crew just did a great job. But this is what they were supposed to do. This is how crews are trained. This is how you're supposed to react to an emergency. And they did what they were supposed to do, and from their perspective, it turned out as well as it could have.
Well, that was part of my conversation with Keith Mackey. He's a former airline pilot who's created his own aviation consulting firm. He went on to say that the investigation into this accident may reveal something, in terms of the procedures for testing stress, metal stress, or something like that could make airline travel even safer. And he emphasized airline travel is very, very safe. People should not be worried. And he even said that you have a bigger chance of being struck by lightning on your way to the airport than ever finding yourself in an airplane with an engine blowing out.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Lynn. We have your letters coming up next. Funny, what a holdover from the old days. Your letters coming up. In fact, we get very few letters these days. Not like in the old shortwave days. We get emails nowadays and comments to our stories on the webpage. But we did get a letter, and in fact, here it is. This is a letter. An actual letter.
Oh, let's see. Let's see the stamps.
Okay, look at those stamps.
Very beautiful.
That is from India. And what we received this week was a New Year's card.
How cool is that?
A New Year's card. And it was sent to us from Sam Samantare in Ashok Nagar, Bhubaneswar, Odisha, India.
Wow.
So thank you very much for that. And
Mr. Sam, that is very cool. What did he say?
Well, he said, Happy New Year. To all at Radio Canada International, best wishes for a happy and prosperous New Year. So isn't that nice?
Wow, that is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Here we are in April. It's supposed to be spring, but we had snowflakes this morning. So spring is...
Yeah, I got my scarf on.
Spring is supposed to go. I don't know why it took so long, whether it was the Canadian postal system or...
It's the Yazidi New Year. So
and we just had Iranian New Year, and, so sure. I'm down with that.
So anyway,
terrific.
Sam Samantare, thank you very much for that. One of these cameras will pick that up. And let us move on to some of the comments that we had. We actually had several replies to a story about the province of Quebec starting its own long gun registry, and the fact that the Inuit in far northern Quebec, in a place called Nunavik, and the Cree Aboriginals of Quebec as well, have requested an exemption citing history and certain agreements with the Quebec government. Quebec has said no, everyone must comply with the registry, estimated to cost $20 million to start and $5 million a year to run. Ryan Scaife wrote this comment.
I do not agree with the long gun registry, nor do I agree with exemptions for any groups, native or otherwise. I am a legal, responsible gun owner and an avid hunter outdoorsman. I am a Canadian citizen, and it does not matter my race or religious background. I believe in equal opportunity, public land use and wildlife conservation, not reallocation. It is time to stop taking this certain groups are exempt type approach to these issues and end the further segregation of Canadian people.
Well, that comment prompted other replies such as this one from Jeannie.
Inuit, that is the native people in northern Canada, are not avid hunters for sport. Hunting is essential for their nutrition. On average, consumer prices for food products are 81% higher in Nunavik than in Quebec City. As you believe in equal opportunity, I hope that you'd consider rethinking your position here. If Inuit have access to nutritious foods by going out hunting with their guns in order to maintain a healthy diet, and until they are offered equity when it comes to food pricing, then so be it. They have already surrendered most of their land, and it is made public to Quebec. So with what little rights to the Nunavik land they were given, they persevere.
And Laz Ipu Jr. also responded.
Try living in the bush and not having a gun. See, even training for a permit isn't guaranteed annually in our communities. Do we just allow our people to go hungry while we wait for officials to act on this? This is injustice and furthering oppression on the oppression they already force us to live with.
All right, on the story about the end of passwords as they slowly get replaced by biometrics like fingerprints or eye scans, Barry wrote this.
I think passwords would be difficult to get rid of. There are many variables that could go wrong. Features of a person can change from sickness, weight loss, weight gain, injuries, accidents, physical assaults, and other factors. Fingerprints can change. You can still lose a finger. YubiKeys can be lost or malfunction on you. What happens, God forbid, if your face gets burned in a fire? Password is still the standard. It depends on how you use it. A good password goes a long way. I know many people who can't afford smartphones. Smartphones are expensive items. I wouldn't get rid of the username as well. Besides, some people have more than one Gmail account and other email accounts.
Now, when I first read that, I said, what the heck is a YubiKey? Do you know what a YubiKey is, or YubiKey?
I think I have one.
Yeah, I think we all have been issued. Yeah.
This is a YubiKey or YubiKey or something. I didn't know. I had to look it up. Because we had these things, but they never said, "Here's your YubiKey." They just said, "Here's this little thing you have to use."
Yeah, that's a Google authentication key. So that if they're not sure it's you, they will ask you, and you can plug it into your computer, and
then you have to touch this little thing here.
It took me a while to get the hang of that.
It'll flash and
yes, I've also stepped on mine, so I have to use the alternative. Please send me a text message with the code number.
It's called two-factor authentication. So it makes sure that somebody who, if somebody gets hold of your password, doesn't end up using your account because they need to have the second factor, which is this or another code that they send you.
I like the question ones. They're easier to remember.
What was your cat's name?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, but you see that's a problem for people who know you well, and we put so much information on Facebook. So it's very easy to figure out who was your mother's maiden name, your first pet, your first school, best friend. Yeah. It's all that information. Somebody who's really targeting you, and you have social media presence, that's pretty easy to get.
And if they do eye scans, what's to prevent someone from simply copying your eye?
It doesn't work that way. That was a James Bond film, as a matter of fact.
Okay. Anyway, all right.
What was it? Never Say Never Again, I think, was the name of that film, where they had the guy. Anyway. All right, let's move on. This is an interesting story for anyone who cooks, and it was called 1/3 of spices sold in Canada are spiked with fillers. That caught people by surprise. A couple of people, including Ethan, asked this.
I'm interested in learning more about the source of the story. You might share that report from CFIA with me.
And that's the Canadian Food Inspection Agency.
Yeah, Ethan, the report was based on my request to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency's Public Relations Department, and they sent me some details on this, and I'll gladly share them with you if I have your email address. So send us your email. And
is it not available to the public, like on the CFIA website or something?
No, it's not. The last time I looked at the site, it wasn't there. This was an internal document that the CFIA had prepared for kind of internal use, and it's a very interesting report because you see. And it's, I mean, I focused on spices, but there are other things. There's honey, maple leaf syrup, which are the two safest things that get spiked the least. But if you're buying olive oil...
Oh, yeah, that's a dangerous one, huh? All right. So CFI, I suppose if somebody went to their website and requested, as you did, for information, they might get it as well. All right. Our Prime Minister visited London this week, and the oil pipeline controversy followed him there. Ursula Wagner wrote this.
Pat Venditti, head of Greenpeace UK, said it was, quote, very hypocritical of the Prime Minister to be here in London talking about climate change while building a climate-wrecking pipeline that can only lead to more fossil fuels being burned, unquote. It simply makes you speechless. I thought Mr. Trudeau was voting for something very different, or he was voted in for something very different. But that is what politics is for, always in the interest of big companies, never mind the damage to the environment and people, and never mind what they tell us before elected in Canada and everywhere.
All right, finally, in a story we mentioned earlier in the show about mobile phones, Facebook, and criminal courts, Peter Ashcroft wrote this.
This implies the possible corruption of true justice. This fact did not occur to me when I was a juryman some years ago.
All right, those are some of the comments posted to our stories this week on the website. And of course, as always, if you have a thought, you can scroll down to the very bottom of each story, and the form to submit your comments are there. All right, the first heavy rains of this season have hit the Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh, and that is just ahead of the much-dreaded monsoon season. Downpours have drenched refugee camps in the Cox's Bazar area, which is now home to nearly 800,000 Rohingya refugees. The rains flooded some of the low-lying areas, but that's just a taste of things to come. Bangladesh's devastating monsoon season starts in earnest in late May or early June, and humanitarian agencies are working around the clock to prepare the camps for the monsoon season. Levon, you had a chance to speak with a UN official about those preparations.
That's right, Mike. Mark, I spoke with Dipayan Bhattacharya. He's the World Food Programme's Deputy Country Director in Bangladesh, and he was in Ottawa this week for meetings with Global Affairs Canada officials. I asked him about the challenges the UN is facing and other humanitarian agencies working in the camps are facing. And to try to illustrate the magnitude of this challenge, he kind of gave me a little comparison of geography of the camps and population density compared to Ottawa.
You know, let me share some very interesting data. I was looking at the population of Ottawa and the total geographic size of Ottawa. Ottawa has about 1.25 million people and over about 2,700 square kilometers of area, which means there is about 400 people per square kilometer. That's the population density of Ottawa. Now let's talk about this huge mega camp, which is Kutupalong mega camp in Cox's Bazar, which is right now the fourth largest city of Bangladesh, and it has a geographic area of just 14 square kilometer, and about 680,000 people are living, which basically gives us about 50,000 people per square kilometer. Just imagine about 400 per square kilometer in Ottawa and 50,000 per square kilometer in this Kutupalong mega camp. This entire area is devoid of any vegetation. It's an undulating surface. So essentially this soil, which is completely now exposed, and as any normal rainfall can already cause a very difficult situation there, and that area receives pretty high levels of rainfall during monsoon and also during the pre-monsoon April and May, and then post-monsoon around October, November. This area also gets a number of cyclones, very significant cyclones. So this area is extremely vulnerable to significant landslides and flash floods. And with no vegetation there, the risk is multiplied many more times. And these people are living in the middle of this condition. About 150 to 200,000 people out of these 680,000 are living in the extremely, extremely dangerous locations within these camps, and they need to be really immediately relocated. A lot of areas will have to be flattened as much as possible so that the flood, the flash flood and landslide risks are mitigated. There has to be a lot of slope stabilization work that needs to be undertaken. Roads, the sides of the roads, because roads are critical for sending all the humanitarian assistance to these people. And even in the middle of the monsoon, we have to ensure that there is continuity. So we are, as a part of a joint engineering platform with IOM and UNHCR, we are engaging about 1,500 to 2,000 Rohingya workers and also, laborers from the host communities, and they are working round the clock to undertake all these different kind of activities. We have brought in heavy machineries, and really we are running against time to ensure that the risks could be really, really minimized, and we'll be able to continue providing food assistance, health services, and all other critical life-saving needs, even in the middle of the monsoon.
That was an excerpt of my conversation with Dipayan Bhattacharya. He is the World Food Programme's Deputy Country Director in Bangladesh.
All right, Marie-Claude, you had something that you wanted to add, because one of the stories, I guess, caught your attention this week.
Yes. As I was mentioning before, there were stories about laws that we kind of always break, or sometimes break, or wish we could break more often. So if I'm referring to the Gérard Como case, I'm sure you can tell us about it. Gérard Como was caught transporting beer from Quebec to New Brunswick, where he lives.
From one province.
Yeah, and there's a law. Every province have their law about the purchase of alcohol on its territory, and it's prohibited to carry amounts of alcohol from one province to another. Anybody wants to add to my explanation?
It's great. We're doing free trade with other countries, but we do not have free trade between Canadian provinces.
And speaking of breaking laws,
that's it.
and alcohol, the Spanish section, which was here in the studio before us, and we're talking about wine, left us a little present. So I thought we might just break a little law here as we get towards the end of the program.
Excellent.
There's no laws against drinking in the studio.
Thank you. The wine was brought by Susana Ochoa Vega. She's a sommelier. How do we say that in English?
Sommelier.
A sommelier.
Sommelier, and in Montreal. And she strongly suggests that Chilean wine.
Just a little taste. Right. All right. Now, the other interesting thing is, speaking of breaking laws, I looked up on the internet some of the weird laws that we have in Canada. Levon, what's one of the first one there?
The first one that jumped at me was that in BC it's illegal to kill a Sasquatch.
What?
So don't break a Canadian law. Let's hope that spring will soon come here, shall we?
By the time the show is aired on Saturday, spring will be here. I'm on my bike on Monday and putting the scarf away. Cheers.
I'm joining you.
Yeah. Cheers, everyone.
And here's to springtime.
Springtime in Canada, which starts in late
officially
April.
It was, a month ago? But it's still going below freezing and unusually cold average temperatures.
And on that note, for Lynn Desjardins, Levon Savant, Marie-Claude Simard, and Chantal Saint-Sauveur, I'm Mark Montgomery. Take care until next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Really nice wine.
Yes, very nice.
Chilean.
No, Spanish.
Cabernet Sauvignon.
Chilean.
1865. It's an old wine.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I don't think so. I think it is.
Well, just in passing, one of the oddball laws that I saw that was kind of funny was offending a place with a bad smell is illegal.
Where?
Keep that in mind when you're on public transit.
Oh, boy.
Offending a place with a bad smell is illegal under the Criminal Code of Canada.
Well, you can't have